I want to welcome Nancy Spiller as our guest tonight. She will be discussing her new body of work, which I'm so excited to see and hear all about. And without further ado, because I know we're running a little late, Nancy, I'd love to turn this over to you.
This is a body of work that I did during my recent artist residency at Fort Worden. It was at Centrum, which is in Fort Worden State Park in Port Townsend, Washington, which is on the Strait of Juan de Fuca. I love saying that. And the Puget Sound across the water from Canada. And it's a lovely Pacific Northwest setting. And I went there for the month of February because I wanted the cold. And I was rewarded with gray skies and lots of weather and even a couple of snow days. And when it rained, it was a drizzly rain. It was never a heavy rain. So that was really, really nice as well. So this is where I did the work. This is looking down on from the hilltop behind Fort Worden. And I'll just show you, can you see my little pointer down here? This is the apartment building that I was staying in. And so they were kind of funky, but they were huge apartments. They were like each resident got their own apartments, 3 bedrooms, living room, dining room, bath, and all that stuff. And then I got a studio, which I have another shot I will show you in a little bit. But I wanted to tell you, so this is the image, this is the object that I launched this collapsology series with. And it's a crushed basket. And first of all, I got to tell you what collapsology is. It's the science of collapsing civilizations, which is a word that was coined in 2015 by 2 French authors of an article on how everything can collapse in our times. And so that's what I've come to call the series. But when it first started, it began with this object that I found a few years ago on the beach in Oxnard, what I think of as a collapsed bicycle basket. It spoke to me and I hung on to it. Then the pandemic hit and certain other life challenges, and suddenly it was speaking even louder to me. I started drawing it multiple times and just thoroughly exploring it as a meditation and a metaphor for personal collapse, societal collapse, environmental collapse, and all the possible collapses. I'm going to share with you now the image that I put up in that online exhibit. And this is just really, I did the drawing with pen and then I put in the ink and, or actually I did the drawing and then and it's gone back and forth, I guess, with the paint. And this was in the online exhibit and we talked about it and I got great feedback from everybody and I appreciate that very much. And so it was sort of the start of it, getting feedback, the first image that I shared with anybody. I did, well, let me get to the next image that I have in line here. Oh, so that was that, and I was working on it and so on. But I wanted to share with you, just to put my work in a little bit of context, some of my earlier work that I've done. And this is the first big thing that I did with art in my life and in Los Angeles, which was Reverse Trash Streams, the Junk Mail Project. It was in 2007. It was 157 pounds of junk mail that I collected at my house in 1 year. And I shredded it and I weighed it. And I decided that I wanted to show it someplace, that if I wrote about it as a journalist and as a writer, if I wrote about it, it would just disappear into the ether. And I wanted people to see it. I wanted to make visible the invisible. And so I did that. I decided I have to show it someplace, and even if it's just in my garage. And but I managed to get a show at the LA Contemporary Gallery in Culver City. It got reviewed in Art in America, which was an incredible thrill. And how we installed the paper, it's like installed like a tsunami wave of shredded paper coming from the back of the gallery, and surrounding it on the sides are the paintings that I did, which were abstractions I took from the shredded mass. And I have a close-up of one of those that I want to share with you. It's titled Compleen. And which is the night prayer from the Book of Hours. And I named these after the Book of Hours, which is a medieval Christian prayer book. And these are small images on large sheets of frosted mylar. They're referencing vellum and illuminated medieval manuscript pages. So this exhibit, this installation was installed on the day that I sold my first novel. And so I got kind of sidetracked and I continued with my writing. And I did a second book, which was a memoir, and I was able to illustrate that with gouache paintings and with line drawings. And but I kept on doing art. And a more recent series that I have been working on that I also have gotten a few pieces into shows, and I think some of you may have seen one or two pieces, is my Flush Point, which is Toilets of the Art World. And so instead of trying to make the invisible visible, I was trying to get viewers to look at what they, we're always told to look away from. And this is the SF MoMA Red Ladies Loo. And this one actually has to be quite large. It's like 5 feet by 4 feet. And you kind of can't look away from it when you're in the room with it. But this was all launched from highly designed toilets that I began seeing more of in museums, like the new SF MoMA. And I began to investigate it as a really unusual, I thought, trend in the art world. And a second one that I did was this one that's in a private collection of Shara Schreier's. Hang on. This is in her powder room in her San Francisco residence. And it's the toilet and powder room in her San Francisco residence. And it's a highly reflective stainless steel toilet. I was told by the designer, like those in prisons. And his improvement was putting a lid on it. And the lid reflects the wallpaper that's on the wall by Robert Gober, that is a repeated image of an African-American being lynched and a blonde white man with his head sleeping on a pillow. And I've also done one of the Whitney's gold toilet that actually may have been melted down. It was stolen and may no longer be in existence. Maybe the only thing existing in the art world is this painting that I did of it. But the list does go on. To get back to collapsology, this is another image that I did around this past December as the holidays were looming. And the holidays for me are a very challenging time with my family. And this I titled Homecoming. And I considered it part of the series that I was working on, the nature of the family, to, do these paintings that sort of spoke to me about the family concerns that I have. Anyway, so this is Homecoming. And these are some of the pieces that I was doing before I went up to Centrum. And this one was actually a lot of fun to do. And I put on my Bluetooth headphones and I listened to my favorite Dan Hicks channel on Pandora. And I got out the felt pens and I just wailed on this thing and the Micron pens and just had a high old time. And then I shared it. I didn't know what to think of it. And I shared it with my son, who is an art collector, and I trust his taste and his eye. And he said, yeah, I like it. He said, it's like Jude's energy. And Jude happens to be his 3-year-old son. And so I thought, okay, yeah, this is like Jude's energy. And in that sense, it were these two guys that I had put, before he even said that, I had put these two guys down here in, sitting on the structure. And it's like my son and his husband, and their son Jude, and they're kind of surrounded and overwhelmed and overtaken by this energy. So, so there's that. And also, before I went up to Centrum, this is a big painting that I did on one of the gessoed. I was working a lot on gessoed paper, just for the ease of storage and portability and everything. Is working on gessoed paper. So this is drawing it and then brushing back into it with white and painting over and just working back and forth. And so arriving at that place. And a lot of these are just, they're like studies for bigger things, or they're process paintings, as a friend has described it, that, you have to do that to get to the next thing and see where it's taking you. And this was a big abstract painting that I did, and I had sitting around and I didn't care for it. And I covered it up with this big atmospheric kind of brushy work. And then I did the image of this object over the top of it. And then I played around with the colors of what that image would be. And I arrived at this copper, and I was happy with that because the copper paint, it's copper acrylic paint. It catches the light in an interesting way, I think. And so the crushed basket was invading all aspects of my life, including, this is a paint your own iPhone cover that my son had sent me, and I couldn't find an iPhone cover for my iPhone 6. They don't sell them anymore, or at least not at the Apple store. And so I did the drawing of the basket on it, and then I added this color in, and then the title that I gave to it was Mondrian Had a Bad Day. So it's a frustrated artist image. There you go. And this is another one that I did, again, at the tail end of the holidays. I titled this one Happy New Year. And this is, again, on Jesuit paper, and getting drippy and washy, and doing the image in black. And then the companion piece to it is white on black. And I just call this one January. And so it's drippy and washy, and it just has sort of a ghost image thing going on there. Let's see, I want to, let me find myself here. I'm moving right along here. Then I went off to Centrum, and I packed up my bags, and I packed up my car, and I threw everything into the car, all my art supplies except for oil paint. And because you can't paint with oil there, and multiple 18 by 24 sheets of paper that I had done up with the gesso, multiple layers of gesso. And I brought one of my field easels because they said they didn't have any. And I packed books. I packed all the small collection of Jung books that I had about the philosophy and psychology of Jung. And I thought it was finally time to read my collected works on him. I also brought Kandinsky's The Spirit of Art, and a Diebenkorn book about his works on paper. And this is the studio where I got to do my work at Centrum. This is typical of the buildings there, old military buildings from the early part of the 20th century. And the studio was up here in the upper corner, and it was quite nice. It was like 264 square feet. And this is the studio facing east. And you can see sort of how I was using space. I had done a lot of these drawings on newsprint. Some of them, like this one here, I'm painting back into it and so on. But when I got there, so I took them all out of the newsprint pad, and I just taped them all up to the walls and started using that as inspiration for doing this. I'll show you the other, this is a long, narrow studio. And this is a long work table that was just really great in the studio. And the windows are all northern exposure. And so that was really nice light. And this is facing west. And those are the two easels. They found one for me when I got there. The other thing is the floor. I was, doing some work on the floor. And yeah, and this is, again, is the countertop that I could just spread everything out. And whenever I had a thought that occurred to me, I could find what it was that I wanted to work with and just go at it. And I had a lot of different paper pads, and I had a Yupo pad that I was working on Yupo, and just a lot of stuff to play with, and uninterrupted time, and just really nice time to be working on these things. The let's see, what's the next one? What's the next image up that I have for you that I wanted to share? Oh, well, one of the things that this is just sort of the start of it. This is graphite and pencil, and there's some chalk in there, and it's on, this one is on the Yupo as well. And I was just going to mention one of the other things that I took along was this wonderful online course from this outfit called Domestika. And it's a European outfit, and they have all these art instructors that are various countries and so on. But I got I got the one from Laura McKendry, and it was titled Illustrating Nature, a Creative Exploration. And she's a British illustrator and fine artist. And the subhead for the title is Illustrate the Natural World with an Experimental Approach Using Watercolor and Ink. So I took my watercolors, I took all my inks, and it was just this great course for, and it was ridiculously inexpensive. It was like $10. And it was great. It was very inspirational, and it was introducing me to new techniques with those materials, or reminding me of others I knew and maybe had forgotten. And it was perfect because I was surrounded by nature, and it all just worked together like it was meant to be. So, so I showed you the studio. This is like just one of the earliest drawings that I had done there, working on the Yupo. This is playing around with ink and wash as per this Domestika course, and using unusual things for mark making, printing with, you know, this round stuff here is, I don't know, the bottom of something round. Maybe it was something I found on the beach or a shell or something. I'm not even sure anymore. And using, I had, I think it was walnut colored ink that I got there. And then I had the black ink, and I was using full strength ink, and working out from there with the washes. And this is the drawing, you know, done in full strength ink that I did on top of it. So again, it's just part of the process, is exploring and you know, seeing what would happen next. And this one was on gessoed paper, and I was using Conte crayon and black and red Conte crayon and some white chalk, and doing the shape and entangling them. And then this wash, these are like washes done just like with cotton balls and stuff. I mean, you know, just really, and brushing things out and so on and so forth. Anyway, I left the studio and I come back the next day, and it struck me that this was, I thought it looked like cave art, that, you know, kind of, it reminded me of the caves of Luscaux. So to me, it's the collapsed caves of Luscaux. Another piece I did was just drawing, and this is drawing with a feather, and this is done on, again, the gessoed paper, and this is large. This is like 24 by 18, I think was the size, the basic size I was using. And it just came out interesting because I was drawing with a feather, and that drawing with a feather just made everything so light and airy looking. So that came out in an interesting way. And I did that also, I did that on the floor. That was the surface that I did it on. I wanted to mention to you, so we're surrounded with nature in Fort Worden, and I just wanted to mention to you too that that Fort Worden is a World War I and II military fort that is now a state park, and it apparently never saw any military action. But the surrounding hills are filled with huge concrete bunkers to watch the Puget Sound during World War II and protect Seattle from invasion. And my runs took me up into the hills, and the bunkers are a real chilling reminder of war, and coming at a time when a war was starting up with the invasion of the Ukraine. But I wanted to share with you sort of turning that chilling vibe around were the packs of deers that were roaming the grounds in Fort Worden. And they were just, I referred to them as the deer. They were just sweet and relaxed around people, and they would come out and eat in the morning, and they would take their rest and then go eat some more and take another rest. They were really quite wonderful and to have around, and they sort of set the tone opposite of those in the bunkers up in the hill. And I wanted to share with you, I would run on the beach on a daily basis. That's my habit, is running on a daily basis. And this was at the end of the beach. This is like this is a lighthouse that is from, I think, the 1890s. So it's right there at the tip of the land, with the Strait of Juan de Fuca on one side and the Puget Sound on the other, and guiding ships home. And it's a national historical monument now. But when I would go down on the beach, I would meet people, I would talk to them. Usually it was people who own dogs, and I would get their stories. I missed my dog, so I loved talking to people about their dogs. And I met this family on the beach, and it was really lovely, charming group. And it turned out, the one family, the adult daughter of this woman who was telling me all about her daughter. Meanwhile, the adult daughter strips off her clothes with the adult daughter's husband, and they go jump into the water in February in this freezing water. And it turned out that this woman has quite a following. She's a Swedish American illustrator and author, and a blogger on that hygge lifestyle. And she came out of the water, and she was the pinkest person I'd ever seen in my life. And I took a photograph, and I turned that into a little gouache painting in one of my books. And that's her husband behind, and that's her. And that's an elderly family friend who was smiling off in the background. I mean, these people were just so enthusiastic. It was really a lot of fun to encounter them down there. And, apparently that freezing water is supposed to be really good for your health. So I don't know. I didn't give it a try. This is another one of the paintings that I did, just, abstract, cover it up with something atmospheric, and then put the basket on top. I just refer to it as little copper. And this object down here, I had, I've played around with tar gel on that Hey Jude painting that I showed you, the orange marks, the orange puddling and marks and things. It's done with pigmented clear tar gel. It's an acrylic medium, and the stuff dries, and you can, peel it up from a surface and put it on other things. So I just had this white one hanging around and ended up painting it, plopping it down in there. And to me, it kind of looked like a lumpy moon of some sort in a very strange universe. At this point, I will mention to you my Jung reading that I was doing, and the two highlights that stuck with me were his belief that it was man's nature to create symbols. And my basket, I just felt like, well, that's good, because this is my symbol of so much here, that my basket is coming to symbolize maybe too much. I don't know. But again, that's my nature, translating pictures into words and words into pictures. So also Jung's belief in the necessity of periodic retreats, spans of solitude, to renew and rejuvenate the creative forces. So he considered sleep as a daily retreat, and of course dreaming, but also days and weeks and months were highly beneficial for creative people in the creative process. And Jung himself had a second home where he would retreat to. This is another image that I did that I titled the Growler Jet. And this is a drawing done on Yupo, and I titled it Growler Jet because the war was, as I've mentioned, the war was just starting in the Ukraine, and there's a naval base that's close by Fort Worden. And there, all of a sudden, there was a number of tremendous rumbles coming from over the Puget Sound, and there were these jets that just kept flying out from the naval base. And I wondered if it was like, some kind of war games that we were getting ready to participate in, with the Ukraine over this invasion. And so I asked about it and looked it up and found out that they're Growler jets and that they're much, much, much louder than the previous iteration of these war planes, which were titled Prowler jets. And they're so loud because they're supposed to jam, like the enemy's, I don't know, radio frequencies or something. But what they jam also is the lives of everybody that's around this area. I mean, it's really like this unnerving sound and this really menacing sound. And people who are living too close to that naval base now have actually brought lawsuits against the Navy for doing this. But the Navy says this is something we have to do and so on. And I mean, it's just really kind of a very strange and unfortunate situation because I mean, it's such a beautiful area. When there aren't Prowler or Growler jets over the Puget Sound, I mean, it's really quite idyllic. So this one is done on Yupo, and I did the drawing in, gosh, I guess I'm not even sure. It's like pen or really heavy duty pencil or something. But I did the background in colored pencils on top of cardboard, which gave it that wavy pattern. But when I was done with it, I just thought it's too much. It was all over. And I went back in, and these were water soluble colored pencils. And I went back in and I just started wiping away at different things. And then this was what I arrived at. And I was happier with this. And in a way, the final one, it kind of reminds me of Lee Bontecue's early work, the wall pieces. It made me think of the wall pieces that felt like war machines that she did like in the late 50s and early 60s. Another one that I did, I was working with water soluble pastels that I got turned on to by this Domestica class and found, and then was able to actually find them in this little tiny art supply and stationery store in Port Townsend. Anyway, they're really fun, and I just got a small set, but the colors are really vibrant. And this, though, was an early playing around with it, and I was using them and then wiping them away and blending them with a little bit of water and so on and so forth, and working back in. And I like this one just because how pale it came out, and I call it looked bruised to me, so it's like a bruised image, and that's what I called it. I call it bruised or bruising, and sort of a bruising collapse. Before I went to Centrum, I got to see for the second time, I went up to San Francisco and saw the Joan Mitchell show before it closed. And so this happens to me. I don't know if it happens to any of the others of you, but when I go see a show by somebody I really like, I end up doing something sort of along their lines. And the thing about Joan Mitchell was when she went to France, that in the show, you go around the corner, and when she landed in France, like in 1959, the colors all became these French Impressionist colors. It was violet and pink and turquoise and, and the greens and just all these beautiful colors and the orange and so on. So I picked up, before I went to Centrum, I picked up a big tube of that turquoise that, made me think of the turquoise that she had used. And so I was playing around with that. And so this was kind of my, my little bit of channeling Joan Mitchell. And I plopped the crushed basket on top of it, and I titled it No Regrets. And that's sort of that. But at the end of all this, I would be curious if anybody else has had or has those experiences where they get influenced by an artist that they go see. I also get influenced by writers that I read. I have to be careful when I'm writing my own stuff, not to get influenced too much by other writers. So, but here's another one that spoke to me after I did it. I wasn't even thinking about this, but after I did it, I was thinking, oh my God, that like looks like a Warhol or something, you know, because it's off register. It's like the basket is off register and it's in white and black. And then these colors that I had splashed in there, I mean, I really seriously was not thinking of Warhol, but after it was said and done, that's kind of what I felt like, you know, it looked like. And so I call it Elizabeth Taylor. This is just another thing, playing, exploring. This is on watercolor paper. I was using watercolor and the water soluble pastels. And then I did, you know, these dots or acrylic paint that I did on top of it. And so again, just working back and forth and playing with and having fun with. And then I got into the ink, and actually this is a little bit of ink, I think, but this is mostly that concentrated Doc Martens concentrated watercolors. And I did this on the floor, and I just, you know, was playing around with dropping stuff in and dropping water in and doing all of that and seeing what would happen and just leaving it on the floor overnight to dry. And you know, and dripping it a little bit in different directions and stuff. So again, just an experiment in mark making and dripping and so on. This is also with the Doc Martens concentrated watercolors, a different approach though. And I drew with the stoppers in the bottle. And so that's how I got my lines. And then the atmospheric stuff around here is, you know, the dipping the toothbrush into the wash and spritzing that over, flicking it and spritzing it over the paper. This is Yupo actually. So doing that for the background. So that one was titled Flight. Again, just playing around. I had a bag. The Domestika instructor, you know, said like play around with, you know, different surfaces and stuff. This was a bag from the stationery store, and I'd crumpled it up and thrown it in the trash, and I decided to take it out and see what would happen. So this is what happened. I drew on top of the bag. And then another challenge or suggestion from the instructor was to build a structure to draw and paint on. And so I took all this recycling paper out that I'd been saving. This is all of the envelopes of instant oatmeal that I had for breakfast while I was at Centrum. And I built it into this structure. And I also took some paper on top, you know, the paper that had gotten some other paint on it from other things, and sort of just glue sticked it all together and put it up on a wall, and had at it with the drawing, which I did, you know, in acrylic and white on top of all of that. That's that. So that was my noisy, that was the extent of the noise I was making there. But then I got quiet and I discovered the tracing table, the light table that was over on one side of the studio. And there was one particular drawing that I had done of the basket that I really thought was kind of elegant, and I liked it. And so I decided to start tracing that. And I did this with 3 Tombow pens that I had picked out from the stationery store because of the colors. I was going for Pacific Northwest colors. There's a dark green and a light green, and then there's that kind of golden yellow. And so I did this one, and I sort of piled them up on top of each other, and I called it Entangled. And then I started continued to work with that particular drawing that I was tracing. And I separated them out for this image, have them going off of the page. And again, it was interesting to me. It was just like all of this stuff was getting very quiet. It was kind of the silence in the aftermath of a collapse. This is just black and white. I had the 2 figures going off to the side of the page, and that was called Adrift. And this is called Aftermath. And this is the 2 figures going off, and it's the turquoise background that turquoise color that I really like from Joan Mitchell. And I like to, I kept the edges on, you know, just sort of fading off like that because it felt to me like it was sort of fading like a memory. And collapse is always best as a fading memory. So that was kind of the end of my journey at Centrum and the self-directed residency that I did there. The last week that I mean, I continued doing other things. I was working with some watercolors and just doing, you know, some repetitive watercolor exercises and drawings and things like that. And then the last week I was there, I did revisions to a novel that I have finished and now is, you know, working on getting out into the world. And now I have the basket, it's hanging from the ceiling of my studio, which is where I shot that picture that I shared with you in the beginning. And I want to begin drawing from down below, drawing this image from down below, because it's possibly in some way it would represent the fall that I took on April 1st, which I've been getting up from and recovering from ever since. I experienced, it was a physical collapse for me. It was a broken hip and a wrist, perpetrated by an unleashed dog. And it happened April 1st, as I said. The month of March, I'd spent all this time and energy, this great energy I generated at Centrum, getting ready for the spring and summer, and all these things I was planning to do with my writing and art. In fact, it was March that I signed up to do this talk, and the plans to further explore doing my collapsology series were felled by an out of control dog. So it's almost as if it were an omen that I have been painting all these collapsed images. And now I have to think, what would Jung think about that? So right now, my main occupation is physical therapy and exercise and getting back to my daily runs and dog walks and art making. But I wanted to share with you another painting that I did that I worked the collapsed image into. This is a painting that I had done a couple of years ago. It's from a photograph I did of Half Dome when the sun lit it up at sunset and the trees were in silhouette. I was down below, the trees were in silhouette. And I did this painting and it's 36 inches high and it's 12 inches wide. A really unusual shape, I know. And I was just always working different things to like go down below here, you know, and then suddenly it struck me I would do this. And so I'm kind of happy with that. But again, it's how this basket is invading all parts and aspects of my life and my art. And it's kind of fun to see where it lands, you know. But I also wanted to share with you, his name is Christopher Wohl, and he was just profiled in the New York Times. He's an older artist and he sort of kind of disappeared from the art world for a while, but he's come back with these sculptures that he's done out of fencing wire from out, he's out in Marfa, Texas, and it's, you know, barbed wire that he finds out on the range. And he does these sculptures, he's done them on pedestals and has displayed them in a gallery. And then he started photographing them and producing books of the photographs of these things. So I thought that that was really interesting. And those are recent work by his. And then just a couple of days ago, I found this other one by him that is a painting that he did, which again, I can't help but see, you know, something of his crushed wire things that he's doing, and also something of my, you know, collapse basket. And this is from 2007 that he did.
That was
was fabulous.
Oh my God. You know,
Gosh, thank you.
First of all, I love Christopher Wohl and I know his work. He's amazing.
I'd never seen it before. Yeah.
And I like the fact that you found one thing and you kept working towards different iterations of it and how it evolved and
Exploring. Yeah.
exploring, you know, that reminds me that, you know, that it's such a good exercise to continue to explore something that you feel very passionate about. And the idea that you got this whole collapsology around it, this whole theme around it, it's really brilliant. But I know everyone has different questions. But, you know, one thing I want to ask you, I mean, because
Go
I've
ahead.
seen
Go ahead.
you have a lot of variety. I mean, I actually saw your show in 2007 on the Shredded. I saw that. I thought, oh, this is brilliant. So you're working with a lot of different media, a lot of different ideas. Do you, I mean, you don't care, do you, how do you catalog yourself as an environmentalist or abstract artist? How do you see yourself?
You know, that's a really great question. And I do think about that. And I think that I maybe primarily as a conceptual artist. And so, but I love to put different skills to work. So I like to paint but I, you know, like I did a piece that, you know, got into actually, I did it for a show that was sort of bring whatever you want show that Doug Harvey did at Shoshone Wayne Gallery at Bergamot Station. And the thing I came up with for that was I had put I had a huge collection of all of these expired like vitamins and stuff. And I put it into a clear plastic canister. And then I filled it with red Karo syrup. I dyed, you know, I put food dye into Karo syrup. And I called the piece Supplemental Faith. And and I put it in that show. And then they set it on a shelf in one of the, you know, they had like about 5 galleries around Bergamot Station, and they set it on a shelf in one of the galleries I was told, you know, to put it in. And I did that. And then I got a call like about a week later from Shoshone Wayne Gallery, and they said, your piece is seeping.
Oh, no.
and the red Karo syrup was dripping out. And I said, it's okay. It's not poisonous or anything. It's just Karo syrup with red food coloring in it. You know, it's not dangerous. And then I did another show that Christine Shoemaker, I think that she juried it. It was up at Kira Volman's gallery up in Pasadena. And I got it into that exhibit, and we set it on a big pedestal, and I put a big square mirror under it. And so it cast this shadow up on the wall. So it really looked very religious, you know. It's very interesting to display it that way. And one of my very earliest things, so again, this is like my conceptual art. One of my very earliest things was I had sublet for 6 months space at the Brewery Art Complex, which is where I met all kinds of wonderful people, including Dawn Arrowsmith and her lovely late husband, Roland Rees. And I participated in the open studios there. And my thing that I displayed was refrigerator magnets, my detritus series. And I did all these refrigerator magnets out of the junk drawers that you can't bring yourself to throw anything away. And so I just figured, well, if I did them as refrigerator magnets, if I ever needed that thing again, I could just get it off of the refrigerator magnet. So it was like all those old used birthday candles and screws and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And I still have those. And I have them on display on a refrigerator. But anyway, so yeah, so I would say conceptual, not to take, you know, too long to answer that question, and I think of the flesh point as being conceptual, but I also think of these things as being environmental. I mean, the reverse trash streams I couldn't believe what was going on with junk mail. I couldn't believe and I blogged about it. I researched about it. I wrote about it, but it was all part of this exhibit, which was the main thing. I mean, you know, my mail person was being injured, you know, from having to carry all of this garbage and deliver it. And I was going upstairs I was told I had to shred it, you know, to keep thieves from stealing my identity or something, and just crazy. And so I just wanted to make that visible. And then the flush point thing, I got into it looking at, you know, these crazy overly designed museum toilets in San Francisco, you know, which has been designated. I mean, the World Health Organization said that the streets of San Francisco are the health disaster there because of all the homeless, and their lack of toilets is like right up there with medieval Europe. And here you've got the people at SF MoMA have, you know, these beautifully designed toilets to go to, and it's a different color for each floor. And I did, you know, I did one for each color for each floor. And then you've got the Whitney commissioned that 18 karat gold, solid gold toilet. And the Italian artist who I'm blocking on his name, he titled it America. And, you know, Trump wanted to borrow art from the Whitney, and they said, no, you can't borrow any of our art, but we'll lend you the toilet. And I think it was inspired, the gold toilet was inspired by Trump, and, you know, and all of that. So I think of it as being environmental as well. And then collapsology. I mean, you know, I haven't fully worked out my thoughts and feelings about collapsology, but just to call it collapsology, I hope will drive people to look into the science of collapsing civilizations. And the term that was coined in France in 2015 is very well known in France and in Europe, and it's only starting to be known in this country because people, you know, so I'm hoping actually it will help spread the word about this science of collapsing civilizations. If anybody's read any of Jared Diamond's books, I mean, he sort of deals with those things. And there are books out about, you know, the collapse of our civilization and what that might look like. So it really is a topic that we should all be concerned with, you know. So the toilets are asking people to look at what we've always been told to look away from. And the crisis with lack of sanitation in the planet is a crisis. So we have these highly designed museum fixtures, and then, you know, a couple of billion people still going out in the wild, you know, and have no toilets whatsoever. I mean, Bill Gates is engaged in this. I discovered Bill Gates has made this like one of his major causes, is to get toilets that can work without water, you know, for undeveloped countries where they can actually treat their sanitation and not just leave it out in the streams and so on. So that's like a big thing. And then with collapsology, again, it's just introducing this idea, getting people to think about, you know, collapse and, you know, what that might look like and how that might happen and so on and so forth.
I think your answers and your questions that you bring up are very topical. And I know Melissa had said something that's very inspiring. I'm just blown away. I mean, you're very articulate, and you have, I think you bring up a lot of things that we think about and see, but the way you express it through your art is quite engaging. It's very engaging.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. And this has been really great for me just to pull my thoughts together about it.
Yes.
And be able to talk about it and then hopefully write about it in a way that it will be coherent. But yeah, thank you.
First I wanted to ask, and I put it in the chat, when the Carol was seeping, did ants come and, you know, want to be a part of the exhibit, or?
Not that I know of.
Oh, okay.
I just think they wiped it up. I didn't even have to go down and wipe it up.
Oh, okay. Did all of it seep out, or just a little bit of seepage?
This is a piece that likes to seep. So
okay.
I made it a couple of other times, and it does tend to seep. And actually my son, the art collector, now has a version of this at home. So I guess if it does seep, they're capable of cleaning it up.
Clean it up, right.
Yes.
And then, you know, I just like the term collapsology. It makes you think of so many different things, you know. Right. In the political realm, of just, you know, your basketry, you think about these things unraveling and kind of falling in on themselves, and you think of buildings that are imploding and all of that. So you kind of go down that rabbit hole of all the things that could collapse, and then what would that look like, and what would it feel like and sound like, and, you know, all of that. So, you know, thank you for bringing that, you know, up to us in this present day.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Congratulations, Nancy. You're that complex linear shape that you work with over and over. And while it represents collapsing or collapsology and came from a collapsed basket, it inspired such amazing creativity. And I think that's what has to follow the idea of collapse is how do you create with this and how do you move it beyond? And while I was looking at all of your imagery of that linear shape, I mean, it was kind of like when I look at clouds and you see all kinds of imagery in clouds, because it was abstract enough and playful enough. And the way you shifted it and turned it, I was seeing birds and fish and horse heads and human figures. And I mean, there was just an incredible range of abstract imagery going on there. It was fascinating. It was great.
You.
And I really appreciate how you interplayed, I mean, how you continually played with the different abstract and color and materials and so forth. That was inspiring. And at the same time, it was really fascinating to see Christopher Wool doing a linear sculpture that certainly relates to what you're doing.
I know.
But while I was looking at all of your two-dimensional work, I was thinking, you know, I'd like to see this linear abstract shape, which actually is quite compelling. And I would like to see it large in three-dimensional.
Oh,
Some sort of, and I know there's a kind of lightweight, malleable wire that could be wrapped or, you know, to create something larger. I mean, I can see this one-person show you've got. and in the center is this sculpture, this larger, it's hard to call it collapse because I thought it was so, I don't know, developed. And it doesn't remind me of I'm sorry to say, it doesn't remind me of anything that's collapsed. It just became, and you developed a life of, it's like it developed a life of its own. And you started referring to them as figures or images. And I'm just wondering, did it start changing in your mind as you really memorize this linear shape, doing it over and over? Did it change at all in your mind and become kind of alive and growing and moving away from the collapse idea?
well, I guess when you put it that way, actually, you could say that about those images that I was doing at the end, you know, that you know, the Tombow pen ones that ended up being, you know, the turquoise painting with I mean, those were sort of drifting off. It became something different, I think, when I got to that, when I was tracing it. I found a particularly elegant drawing that I had done early on, and then I just decided to, you know, pursue that. Yeah, so for those, it became something different. And
that's creativity in action.
The what?
That's creativity in action.
Well, I guess, yeah, I guess it is. And I appreciate your observations in regards to all of it, because, you know, I've never done this with a single object and done it over and over and over again. And it is a great adventure to do that. And I highly recommend it. And again, I was just doing it in all these different mediums and in different ways. And I love the idea, though, of doing it as a three-dimensional sculpture. And another artist friend had actually suggested that, and he does set designs for films and stuff. And he said, you know, you should check out baling wire. Yeah. And he suggested baling wire, and I do it with baling wire. And so, yeah, I would love to do that. I mean, I've also worked when I was a teenager. I did all of this stuff with paper mache. And so like a big clunky paper mache sculpture could be kind of interesting as well. Yeah. But the baling wire would definitely be easier to do than a big clunky paper mache. But I don't know, it's like I could play around with that. And I really love that idea of doing that. So, okay, when I do the other thing about this is like all these images are so many different things. I often make this joke that I could do a one person show that would look like a group show, because it's like a lot of, when I paint, things come out looking like, somebody else did it, like not the same person did it. Anyway, so when I do the group show called Collapsology, I could see, as you say, having like a giant three-dimensional object, in the middle of it. That could be really a lot of fun. So,
Yeah. By the
yeah.
way, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Today I got my the New Yorker magazine, and there's an incredible essay, an article on Yoko Ono,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
which is a fascinating article.
It
And
is.
anyway, she didn't like being categorized. And this kind of made me think of you and the range of work you do, which is all so, I mean, it's really good, bright stuff,
Oh, thank you.
the range of your work. And I think it's okay not to be categorized. I mean, they tried to stuff her into the Flexus movement and all that.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to be categorized. And I think that's a marvelous idea. Especially when you have the ability to do this range of work. And probably, your work does stem from ideas, but, which is the conceptual direction, but still it's, it's like you're larger than that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Nancy, I think I saw the basket that day when we were in your studio, and how you work from objects for a long, long time. And it really struck me thinking about, because the idea that civilizations collapse in that framework, or the usage of the word like buildings collapse, we're used
Yeah.
to rubble, we associate it with disasters. But reality, if you kind of take this with, that the need for the power structures that have been in the broader culture to collapse, and yet the matter is still there, the ideas are still there, the new possibilities. And so often what I love about this is it did materialize, and it had a commonality, but each version was somewhat unique until you were copying. And that actually, I think it's really important, because we think about the idea that sometimes when people want to envision something unique or new, it's this idea that it's a singular. And the fact that even in your own work, there are multiples, and that our real capacity to allow the variations in order that we actually do not stay entrapped by the current structures. I mean, the basket is great, but I saw it often more, maybe because I too was seeing fish the early stages and thinking how ironic that you went to the Northwest and to up to a place. But I've sort of, many ways it could be like a collapsed lobster basket, or, there's so many different forms it could take. And, but I think that aspect of just persisting with it is really quite wonderful. And I think it's a call and an invitation for us to do that, and not to just also, if we land on a particular image that satisfies an expression, to maybe hang with it a little longer, or go back even if it frustrates or doesn't quite take us where we thought it might, but to just really, it's kind of a call to persist and see what else, and use it as a screen. I mean, it's almost as a way that all the variations in your life, from the accident with the mega dog and the mean neighbor and all these things that, that how in that symbol, and how unique that you would be calling in Jung in your consideration. And I do think I also just, kind of playing your book titles with your work, then I guess I just end with thinking it totally, I think Kandinsky would be proud. It definitely is a spiritual art.
Oh.
Agree, totally agree.
Thank you. I actually, I neglected saving or sharing with you. I'm sorry. I really wanted to share this quote. So I was up there on my second day of my residency. It was February 2nd. And it was Gertrude Stein's birthday, which came to my attention because I read on a daily basis the Writer's Almanac from Garrison Keillor. And it was Gertrude Stein's birthday. And there's this great quote that I wrote down in my journal. And when I was going back for this talk, looking through my journal, I copied it down and I want to share it with you. And so on February 2nd, I got this quote from Gertrude Stein. There ain't no answer. There ain't gonna be any answer. There never has been an answer. That's the answer. And I thought, oh my God, Garrison, you're so wonderful. He didn't do that stupid quote about her saying there's no there, from Oakland or something. He came up with something else. And I just love that quote. There's no answer. That's the answer.
And that's the answer.
Yeah. And that set me free. It was like, it was permission, just to like go off and do and persist. And the other thing I will mention is that the Diebenkorn book, the little Diebenkorn book that I got at this wonderful show that they had of Diebenkorn's work on paper up at Pepperdine. It's a little book. I don't know if anybody can find it, but they're just wonderful paintings that he did on paper. But one of the quotes in there is that there is no painting I can't paint over. And I actually used that. I was taking, so for a while there, my practice consisted of finding these paintings that I had done like in a notebook or something. And then I really didn't like it and I never liked it. And every time I looked at it, I didn't like it. So I would take it and I would copy one of Diebenkorn's paintings onto it. And in doing that, you like learn how Diebenkorn's paintings work. It's that thing of copying, whether it's art or whether it's writing, copy out a great paragraph, you understand better how the paragraph works. But yeah, that was a fun, good exercise, was copying these little Diebenkorn paintings onto like the paintings of mine that I didn't care for. So I highly recommend that.
Nancy, I also wanted to say that the journalist in you helped me to visualize your work and what you were thinking and the processes because of the way you are able to explain it to us. It was just so clear and so vivid that, having those two, very dynamic skills is such a plus. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Maybe some essay will come out of it or something, but for now, but it was really nice talking with everybody.
Just watching the development and your thought process really, it blossomed. Your artwork changed and blossomed. And I think what you're saying is that that if you had a group show, it would be like a group show, but I saw this continuity there. There was a spirit that was, whatever you did, it was your impression that was on there. It was your mark. And not only, the experimentation with the backgrounds and everything, but how you positioned your line drawing. And it started becoming more alive as you started changing the backgrounds and like you said, the Andy Warhol one where you overlaid two color, the black and white, and they were off, registered, and then you started separating them more and adding more elements. That whole thought process was flowing.
Were you there for 2 weeks, Nancy?
I was actually there for a month.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it was 4 weeks and it was a long time. I was ready, 2 weeks probably would have been better. But I signed up for a month because like after a couple of years of COVID, I just felt like I needed like a month without the dog barking and without my husband asking what's for dinner, It was like so they take care of themselves. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And how did the young reading come into it at all, or was that just something you were doing? I don't know.
I got, okay, I'll tell you about Jung. I had these two books. One is the social meanings of Jung, and it's a sociologist who, is sort of explaining Jung and the meanings for society and so on. And then another one was a primer on Jung. And both of these books were really old paperbacks that were like written in the 1970s. And I'd had them forever and I'd never read them. And so I got them and I was really enjoying them. And then they kept talking about this Jung essay that I should read. And I actually happened to find it and I tried to read it and I just found his writing impenetrable. And so I found like the stuff just wasn't, his stuff wasn't necessarily sticking with me, except for like this thing about, like I said, about, you need to do these retreats and humans, it's a natural thing for them to do symbols. And then I'm interested in the symbols that he was taught, or people were interpreting as symbols and stuff. I mean, so I would recommend like reading about his writing and not reading himself. But the other thing was I was keeping a journal while I was there and I was writing my dreams down. And so a lot of his stuff has to do with dreams. And so I don't really go with his dream interpretation necessarily. I think it's kind of weird and too specific to whoever's had that dream. But I found that of interest. I found that of interest. And so I was writing the dreams down. I think I was remembering dreams more because of that and that kind of thing. So that was helpful. But, to ask me like, what is Jung's position on anything, I couldn't really share that with you.
But Jung is the epitome of what you were writing against, in a sense. I mean, he was so busy creating his construct as an opposite to Freud that he created, he's an example of someone in a field that is more interested in the system he's created. And he has a lot to lose to move it around. And that's just how they create the structures that have been really useful to us at one point to build the culture, but maybe not any longer.
Well, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. It's a really interesting way of looking at it. And, and he tore down Freud's structure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was his whole thing, was parting.
And then he wanted to build his.
Yeah. And build his. And then, like I said, these books were in the 1970s. And now it's like, I want to know more about how all of the recent brain research that's been done on neurochemicals and all of this sort of stuff. It's like, how does he stand up against all of this brain research? And there actually is somebody out there writing about it, and I plan to do some more reading about it. But that's my current interest in regards to all of that stuff, because the brain research is just fascinating. But it's like, so what does he look like in respect to that? The other thing is he was kind of a wacko, like he had his wacky side. He believed in UFOs. And I mean, he just, was going off the beaten path with certain, in certain respects. But yeah, I mean, he remains an interesting guy, but I love what you just said about his building the structures, and maybe I'll have to do one that's,
dedicated to him. Very Jungian.
Yeah. So,
well, Nancy, thank you so much. You have enlightened me, and I'm sure everyone feels the same. You're an inspiration.
thank you.
Thank you so much.